There we go. All right, ahoy, hoy. Welcome to this live. We're going to have Heathen Queen here any second now. Get my microphone's a mess here. All right. Still trying to get used to the whole live setup in StreamYard, so please forgive me if I doing a little cleanup. Hey everybody, hope you're doing all right. And Heathen Queen should be here any moment now. I've sent her the link. There she is.
Hello.
I have, excuse me, ahoy hoy, as Mr. Burns is wont to say.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine.
Okay, perfect. How are you?
Oh, I'm sick.
Oh no.
I was at SBL having a great time, but there are like 3 nights of receptions that go late into the night, and some of them are quite loud. And so I was yelling late into the night for 3 straight nights, and my voice was ruined. And then usually when that happens, I come home and within a day or two, bam, I got a cold. So
yeah. Are you sure? Are you still up for this?
Yeah.
Okay.
I got the energy. I just
cool.
I just have my nose is all rashed, and things are I may be coughing every now and then or sneezing, so
no worries. I didn't actually realize we were live, so I'm glad I didn't say anything. I just realized when I saw all the comments. Hey everybody. Hello. Whoops. Anyway.
Yeah, I don't know how to do the whole green room thing yet, so sorry about that.
No, it's fine. It doesn't it matters. It was just kind of funny. Oh yeah.
So you could not attend SBL because you had finals. Is that what I hear?
Yeah, I do. Who told you this? No. So finals are actually going to be the week after next.
Okay.
And this week was our Thanksgiving, I guess, break. We didn't have class. I've spent my days working on papers and other stuff. But mostly I don't have any money, and so I'm a grad student. And 2, it wasn't I don't know. I didn't do a lot of I wasn't thinking I was going to be able to go, so I didn't look at even what weekend it was. I just knew it was coming up. And so I could have probably, if I had the funds, I probably could have made it because I don't have finals that this week. But I've spent this quarter just settling in, so maybe next go around. Yeah.
Well, next go round will be San Diego, so that's the big one. That's the one you want to be at.
Yeah, no kidding. That sounds lovely. So that's in another year then?
That's in another year. It's the weekend. It's the Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday before Thanksgiving every year.
Okay, great. Yeah, maybe next year then. I'll have a better feel for how everything's going. How was it?
Oh, it was excellent. It was a great time. I always enjoy SBL. I get to see a bunch of good friends, many of whom I only get to see once a year in person. And then this was extra special because they gave me this award for public scholarship, which I was very surprised by and was very excited to see. Thank you very much. And so a lot of people normally come up and say hi to me at SBL, but I had a lot more people coming up and saying hi to me. And then there is also, just because of my social media presence, there are a lot more people who know me than before. And so people have been recognizing me at SBL from social media for the last, for the previous 2 SBLs, but this one, it was a lot more.
Forget all the like scholarship you've done. It's just social media.
And then there was a panel review of my book from last year.
Oh yeah, how did that go?
That was really good. Wonderful scholars on there. Had Susan Ackerman was one of the respondents. Saul Oleon was one of the respondents. Esther Hamori.
I think she's the only name that I recognize. Not that means anything, but.
And then Yitzhak Feder was the last respondent, and he just published a great book on purity and pollution in the Hebrew Bible through a cognitive perspective. So,
very cool.
Yeah, and they were very kind. There were criticisms here and there, but overwhelmingly positive.
People have to do that.
You gotta say something. Yeah. And I almost missed it. So I literally almost missed my own book review panel. I went to lunch with Elizabeth Schrader-Pulzer, who is a wonderful scholar who works primarily on Mary Magdalene. And I was like, yeah, that'll be great. And then my panel is at 3. I'll come home or back to the hotel, and I'll take those 2 hours to finish working on my response to the respondents. And I get into my hotel room, throw stuff on the bed. I'm lucky I still had my pants on. And and one of my good friends texts me and says, hey, man, we're in your session. It's getting ready to start. Where are you? And I looked at my phone. I was like, it says here it doesn't start till 3. And then I looked at the schedule on the app, and apparently I had set it in my phone when I was in one time zone, and when I traveled to another time zone, the phone was like, oh, you must have meant to you wanted it at this time. So I booked it down to the lobby of the hotel and across to the convention center and up the escalator and into the room, and everybody thought it would be hilarious to give me a standing ovation.
That is very funny, actually.
Yes.
Did you see Kip's comment in the chat? Sorry.
That David Falk said he shared an elevator ride with none other than Bart D. Ehrman.
Yeah, so.
I talked with David Falk at my first night there. He was in the lobby of the hotel. And I will have things to say about that separately. But I got to talk with Bart, too. We chatted for a while about shared literary agents and experiences writing first trade volumes and things like that. So
very cool.
Yeah, I told him I would email him, but I need to ask him if he wants to come back on the podcast. I think there would be some cool stuff to talk about.
That would be super cool. I like that you're just casually dropping like our shared literary agents.
Well, my agent has always spoken about when he was a bigwig at HarperCollins and was one of the people who worked on several of Bart's books. So he and Bart go way back. So
that's great.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it was also the busiest SBL I've ever had. I've been doing this since 2007, and normally I like to go just hang out.
You can't do that when you're famous.
Unfortunately, no. I had a lot of meetings, and I'm on the steering committee for one of the program units, the Mind, Society, and Bible, which is the Cognitive Science of Religion program unit. I'm on the steering committee now, and so we had to have a business meeting, and so yeah, I was all my meals were already scheduled out, so it was much different than what I'm used to. Somebody says, would you ever do a live stream with Bart one day or invite him on Data Over Dogma podcast? Would be fun. I would be happy to. I know he's a busy dude. We had him on the Data Over Dogma podcast. I think it was like episode number 4, where we talked about his new book, Armageddon. But yeah, I'd be happy to do a live stream with him or have him on Data Over Dogma. Oh, by the way, that reminds me. On Tuesday, I'm going to be recording a very special episode of the Data Over Dogma podcast. It won't be released for a bit, but we will have a very special guest on who will help us answer listener questions. So if you have any questions that you want to see answered, email contact@dataoverdogmapod.com, and maybe we'll get to them in our little mailbag episode.
I'm curious. I'm interested. Curious and interested.
Well, I got to tease the special guest a little bit, so I won't let everybody here know. All right, what are we talking about tonight? Did you have any thoughts, or you just wanted to catch up?
I don't know. Yeah, I kind of just wanted to catch up. I was talking to Dr. Stackert the other day, and I was saying how everybody keeps asking me, like, what are you learning? Like what are you learning? What are you learning? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I'm learning a lot, but I don't I have I feel like I'm in that stage of like learning to talk where you're taking it all in. So you're like, there's like a silent period, and everything's sort of like percolating until I can like put it together. So for everyone that knows me and that keeps asking, I'm sorry. I'm not like intentionally just not like talking about stuff. It's just the one thing that I knew going in was that I didn't know much. I knew that I knew more than the average bear, but not a lot still, given how much there is to know about everything. And starting this, or being almost finished, I guess now with this quarter, the only thing I really could say that I've learned so far with any confidence is that I know even less than I thought I knew. And I didn't think I knew a lot. So like the things that I don't know how to, so I don't know. Anyway, we can talk about whatever.
There's that little arc where you think you know stuff, and then once you start studying it, you realize how little you know, and then the more you learn, you kind of gradually come back up. But that little drop off that's real. And what have I gotten myself into?
I just have to do the next day and the next day and the next day. What is this? How long does one have to study ancient Hebrew at the university level before you can read the Old Testament? Well, if you're at the University of Chicago, it's approximately 18 weeks. And then you get to get right into it.
Just give me 1 second.
You're good.
I'm actively doing other stuff, which is a dumb way to go about a live. But I wanted to let people know I am going to do something I've never done before, and I figure I might as well start promoting it. I am going to be joining Captain Dadpool and a number of others on Heroes for Charity. We're going to be doing a charity Dungeons and Dragons campaign.
I will be there as well.
And you will be there as well. And this will be the first time I have ever played Dungeons
and
Dragons.
Me too.
So we are both going to be newbies.
I have no idea what's going on. I'm not even going to try and figure out what's going on. I'm just going to show up. Because I think that'll be more entertaining.
Yeah, and I don't know if I'm supposed to be prepping or something. People are talking about preparing characters and everything.
I'm my own character.
So my 14-year-old daughter knows a lot more about this than I do. I'm going to be trying to figure out how to make this all work.
Yeah, none of my sisters have ever played D&D. I've never played D&D. So we'll see. That should be fun. We do not need costumes. At least I don't think.
That's what I understand. Yeah, that was made clear to me. So
yeah.
But there are going to be a lot of people there who've been doing this for a long, long time. So
yeah.
I'm not there to win. This is all for charity. So
I didn't know you could win D&D. I thought it was.
Can you
like,
win?
I don't know.
I assume there was a winner. You finished the campaign, maybe.
Maybe.
I don't know. Rescue the princess.
I'll just be the princess. I'll just wait to be rescued. Chip says, "Oh, come
I think
on."
we're giving him a coronary. Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry. I never played. I don't know. Like, okay, I'm gonna be so super real. I walked into a game store one time, like, because I like board games a lot, and there was a bunch of people playing. Well, not a bunch, like some people playing D&D, and I just turned around and walked out. I was like, "What are they doing?" And I'm sorry to everyone that would have thought I was really rude. But I'm gonna play, or at least be there. So we'll see. Yeah.
Yeah. Are we on teams? Do we have? Okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
If you don't die, you win. All right. Well.
All right.
See how well that goes.
Winning is the journey. Yeah, I don't know. So I guess I'm hoping it'll be fun. Oh, I can tell the people I'm currently one thing I'm working on, which I'm finding very interesting. For my intro to Hebrew Bible class, we only have to write one like real paper, and the paper I'm writing is basically comparing like 6 of the ancient flood myths, and it's like basically doing a literary analysis of the J source, the P source, Zeusudra, the Deucalion, Gilgamesh, Adrahasis. I think that's it. And while most of these were already stories I like sort of, well, some of them I really knew, some of them I knew less, but kind of. And so sort of exploring the function of the flood within the greater story, and then like the function of each of the main characters in those stories. I don't have anything like earth-shattering to tell anyone since it's my first quarter of grad school. I'm like,
yeah,
but it's an interesting project nonetheless. So that's about it. Yes, it's Dan Live.
You can rent the whole seat, but you'll only need the edge. Edge. Sorry, that's from an old ad for a monster truck rally I heard a long, long time ago, but I thought it was so funny.
That's funny. I don't.
Does Evan Almighty count as a flood myth? I don't think so. Not an ancient one, anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, but I don't know. I just thought I would. That's the one thing that concretely that I can tell people I'm working on. So there you go. But yeah, I didn't have anything in particular I like had in mind to talk about. Just wanted to catch up. I'm happy to, if like you want to take questions from people. I just wanted to take advantage of having some time off.
Yeah, that comes at a premium when you're in graduate school.
Yeah. All right. Well, folks, if you have any questions, probably geared towards Dan usually, but if you have any for me, you can ask me too. So fire away. Otherwise, well, not otherwise, or until then, it's supposed to snow here tomorrow.
It snowed here the last 2 nights.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's not a lot, and it's not really sticking around, but
yeah. It snowed once on Halloween, and then that was the last time it snowed. It's supposed to snow tomorrow, and then we have like another period of no snow. Let's see. Were Adam and Eve the first slaves? I know that Israelites are identified as God's slaves, and Paul and several others introduced themselves as the slaves of God. Whew, there's like a lot to pick apart in that, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but there's a lot to parse out.
Okay, sorry. We're
No, you're
Adam and Eve,
good.
the first slaves. I know there's got slaves in Poland, several others introduced and slaves of that. Yeah, that's more of a Greco-Roman period ideology. We have, yeah, the notion that Adam and Eve were the first humans is already late. Like it does not go back as far as other texts within the Hebrew Bible go. But I don't know that we have the metaphor that is used far more commonly to refer to Israel's relationship to God is that they're either God's son or God's wife. You see that a lot more than the servant metaphor, although worship is the word for worship is the same word for to serve, from which derives the noun for enslaved person in Hebrew. So now, when you go back to some of the Mesopotamian creation accounts, you get the idea that humanity was created precisely to be the enslaved people to the gods because they were tired of doing everything, all the upkeep. And that's one of the distinctions of the Adam and Eve account, is that it's where with other societies you had clear stratification when you had royalty and then commoners and things like that. The idea you have in Genesis 1 and then Genesis 2 and 3 is that all humanity is kind of the same and has kind of royal status. They all function as God's image, which is very similar to how the royalty would have been treated in other nations. And so you do have kind of an elevation of the status of humanity in those passages. But again, those are coming later on. Those are not early first millennium BCE accounts of creation.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say I ran into David Carr at SBL, and he's going to come on the podcast, and we'll talk about some of the traditional origins of the stories from the primeval history. So Adam and Eve,
Very interesting.
The Tower of Babel. Yeah, it's going to be a good time.
Yeah, I actually, is this the book? No, it's in my backpack, I think, but it's like what's it called? It's called I Read Inscriptions from Before the Flood. And it's a collection of sort of works on it. I've been using it for my paper, and it's been super interesting to see the ways that people have sort of approached studying like Genesis 1 through 11 largely. I mean, in this book anyway. And to your point earlier, like part of what I've been doing with this paper is like reading these stories, which usually follow the same kind of structure. You have creation, and then you have destruction, and then you have sort of this like recreation or whatever. And so to Dan's point, like in the myth of Atrahasis, humans are created because before humans, there's two classes of deities. And one is sort of like the upper class deities, and the lower class deities effectively do all of the work for the upper class deities. And at a certain point, those lower class deities revolt and rebel. And so I believe it's Enlil, in order to try and make everything copacetic, is like, well, we'll just create humans and they'll do all of this work. They'll do all this work for you, and then you guys can just sort of be more like us. Which like is a very, very clear indication of the author trying to make sense of like why he has to work all day. And honestly, same, but it's interesting to sort of see the evolution in thought about creation from like, yeah, we're just here to do work. And it's not a straight line, obviously, but to being sort of equated with kingship and royalty and having dominion over everything around them and like all of that. And obviously I'm not like proficient in Hebrew yet, but when I was listening to my professor speak about it, Dr. Chevelle, he was talking about how the words used are those for royalty, and like the only people that describe themselves that like in those terms were royalty back then, and like other people wouldn't do that because like royalty doesn't usually respond particularly well to other people stating a claim to them. But
and
you know,
I think there's a degree to which one of the reasons Israel survived the way it did is because it was so small and it did not have as much stratification and as much social complexity, because I think that would have gotten in the way of a lot of the jockeying for power and the cult centralization and all that kind of stuff. I think with a larger society like Assyria or like Egypt or something like that, that would have failed. But because they were so small and kind of just one stratum, and then you had the priestly class was trying to hold themselves up as better. Yeah. It's I've got to talk with, who am I? I'm going to be interviewing somebody who has a book out about why we have the Bible. I forget who it is, but I'm going to ask them about that. Somebody asked a question. And it's refreshed. What's your opinion on the SBL Study Bible at the moment? So this is my paperback edition of the SBL Study Bible. So this is a revised. This is revising and replacing the HarperCollins Study Bible. I still think I like the New Oxford Annotated Bible, which there's the 6th edition, which will incorporate the updated edition of the New Revised Standard Version. That will be coming out probably within the next year or maybe 2. So I'll have to see how that does. But the New Oxford has thematic essays in the back, and I find those incredibly helpful. They're written by wonderful scholars. The HarperCollins does not do that, but one of the cool things that they do is include little sidebars and sometimes photography and stuff like that, running with the text that are
pictures.
Yeah, there's some pictures, and then there are, and some of those pictures are there to kind of explain things that are a little difficult. And then you have, like, this sidebar says, interfaith, a Korean perspective. And then you have a discussion within the book of Proverbs. And most of these sidebars are taken from BibleOdyssey.org. And I was
certain someone has one in there.
Well, I was mentioning this online, and one of my friends was like, "Yeah, you've got one in there." I was like, "I do." So I wrote a piece for Bible Odyssey years ago on the names of God, and so right next to Exodus 3, where God introduces themselves to Moses, you have my little piece, or a selection of my little piece on names of God. And so, yeah, not everybody can say they're in the Bible. That was, I thought that was pretty cool. So, I think as far as study Bibles go, it's pretty helpful. There are some things that I'm not a huge fan about. I think the NRSV does have some issues, some things I don't think the translation does well, and I think there are some gaps in the coverage here. Like, you have a lot of interesting sidebars that are addressing controversial topics and passages that are weaponized a lot today, but the discussion of 1 Corinthians 6:9 I think is inadequate. The translation is not great, and the notes are not good, and then there's nothing at all regarding Leviticus 18:22 and Leviticus 20:13. And I heard from the editor of the sidebars that she said she's pretty sure something was written for that, but it must have been cut for space or something like that. So, yeah. So I do have criticisms of the study Bible, but if you're looking for a new study Bible, I would recommend this, and I will probably end up recommending the New Oxford Annotated 6th edition when it comes out.
Also, for anyone interested, I bought this the other day for class, which is the Jewish Study Bible. Now, it doesn't have, obviously, all of the books of the Bible because it's the Jewish Study Bible, but it's really, really good. So if anyone's more interested in sort of the Jewish perspective on the Old Testament-ish, it's excellent and affordable.
There you go. And Jewish Annotated New Testament, if you want a Jewish perspective on the New Testament, is also
I have wonderful. That as well. Yeah, it's just far away, so I'm not going to. Both very good.
Somebody says, can you recommend a good translation of the Pseudepigrapha? James Charlesworth put together a 2-volume set of Apocrypha and Pseudepigrapha 20 years ago or so. That is a really good collection There are newer translations of some of those coming out, but I don't know of one that consolidates everything that's called pseudepigrapha together. There's probably something somewhere.
Is the person you're going to interview Jacob L. Wright?
Could be.
Sorry, that was somebody else asking.
Yeah, why the Bible began. That sounds familiar. Question. Wikipedia says Elohim was the Canaanite head god, and others, including Adonai, were regional gods under him. Ooh. What is the basis of that, and to what degree is that accurate? To the 0th degree. No. So Elohim is a uniquely Hebrew word. In other and Canaanite languages, it's just El. And so the high deity within the Canaanite pantheon was El. Adonai, or the Tetragrammaton, is unattested outside of Israel. There is absolutely no known deity from any other pantheon besides the Israelite one named Adonai or Yod-Heh-Vav-He. So we do have Deuteronomy 32:8-9, which suggests that Adonai was brought into the Israelite pantheon and probably initially entered the pantheon as a second-tier deity, who was given the nation of Israel as their inheritance from Elyon, the Most High. And so there is a degree to which Adonai probably began their tenure as a second-tier deity, but very quickly was consolidated with the high deity El. I would say probably between 1000 and around 900 BCE. But yeah, Adonai is completely unknown from any other pantheon besides the Israelite. And Elohim is just a noun that means deity, deities, or it can be an adjective that means divine. It's not the name of any deity.
Also, I'll say this. My favorite thing that I've learned so far at school is the number of places that where the English Bible says God, the Hebrew says gods. That's that's my favorite thing so far. How much do we know about the religious climate of the Middle East prior to the rise of Abrahamic religions? A pretty decent amount.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, there's so we've got some stuff in for instance, the Ugaritic literature. Now when you say Abrahamic religions, the traditions about Abraham are mid first century, early to mid first millennium BCE. So you go back to the Ugaritic literature, and that's pre-Abrahamic religion of any kind. But a lot of those themes and a lot of the characters and a lot of the conventions and traditions that we find in the Bible are found there as well. So we can reconstruct a bit, particularly from the Ugaritic literature. But then we've got Mesopotamian, we got Egyptian, we got Hittite, we got other stuff. So in 1 Corinthians 6:9, can you explain the use of arson something koite? Also, yeah, how is it men who bed things with men, but there isn't a second men, or even a second noun there, right? Right, there's not a second noun there. 1 Corinthians 6:9. Well, no, there is a second noun there. It's malaki or malakoi, if you're nasty. And that is that's kind of a pejorative that means soft ones. And that would be a reference to, for lack of a better term, bottoms. And the arsenokoite or arsenokoitai would be the tops. And the idea here is arsenokoite is a neologism. Paul coined it based on the Greek translation of Leviticus 18:22 and 20:13, combining the whole concept of mishkavei isha, the lyings down of women. Coined this term, which basically refers to a man who would lie with another man as with a woman. So it means the one who is taking the insertive role, the active role. But 1 Corinthians 6:9 also refers to the malaki, who would be the ones taking the receptive role, or the passive role. Now, when you look at the Greco-Roman world and Greco-Roman period Jewish discussions about human sexuality, their understanding of what was going on here is just completely different from how we understand human sexuality today. They didn't have a concept, like for one, they didn't have a concept of a versatile role, which I think would be the majority of people who identify, the majority of men who identify as homosexual would say that
there are
adopted,
switches.
yeah, a versatile role. That concept wouldn't really have computed because they explained why a man would seek out the insertive role one way, and then they explained why a man would have this pathology that would drive them to seek out the receptive role in a completely different way. And so seeking out the insertive role was more understandable because they're men, they're at the top of the hierarchy of domination and penetration. It's only natural to want to, you got a hammer running around, you're looking for things that look like nails. But it was less easy to explain why someone would seek out the receptive role. And so they came up with this pathologizing idea. And so their understanding of sexuality was completely different. And when we look at Paul's attempt to account for it in Romans 1, where he basically starts with natural theology, the nature testifies that there's a creator. No, everybody is without excuse because they can observe nature. They should know who the real God of the universe is. And so you all stand condemned. And because of your iniquity, God has, I'm trying to remember exactly what the phrase is in Greek, but basically there's kind of a governor that God puts on sexual desire. And because these people have rejected God, God is removing that governor and allowing that sexual desire to run rampant and to overflow and go in all kinds of inappropriate directions. Thus, the prevalence of all this same-sex intercourse. So Paul is basically saying this only happens to Gentiles. We don't have it among the Jewish folks because we're good, righteous people, and God has kept those controls in place. But all you dirty, dirty Gentiles are doing that because God has removed those controls. So, like, none of this is accurate. None of this is supported by any data whatsoever. It is Paul's rationalization for the existing kind of conservatism regarding sexual activity among Greco-Roman period Jewish thinkers.
Yeah, and sorry, I didn't see who it was, but they asked if this sort of top-bottom thing had something to do with class and rank. And I think something that's super important to understand about at least the Roman times were that, like, that role of insertion had to do, like, primarily with being weak, with being sort of the person who's being controlled. And it was very much the female role. And so if you were like a Roman citizen or like a Roman soldier or someone who was wealthy enough to own slaves and you were a male, because you wouldn't be a female, then you would never want to be in the lower position because you are a Roman citizen. You're supposed to be, this idea of masculinity that's always being in control, always dominating, sort of always being at the top of the hierarchy. So in some ways, I think it has a lot to do with like class and rank, but in a way that I think is a bit more expansive than that question might suggest.
And if anyone is interested in more about sexuality in the ancient world, there's a scholar named, I'm trying to remember his first name. I'm pretty sure it is William Loader, Loader, has published the New Testament on sexuality. He's published the Pseudepigrapha on sexuality. He's published Philo, Josephus, and the Testaments on sexuality. He's published Enoch, Levi, and Jubilees on sexuality. He's one of the leading authorities on concepts of sexuality in this period within Judaism. So I would recommend those texts. And he even published an article called Reading Romans 1 on Homosexuality in the Light of Biblical / Jewish and Greco-Roman Perspectives of its Time.
And you said, sorry, William Loader, Loader?
Mm-hmm. In fact, I'll just do.
Oh, look at that! I forgot I had hands.
Oh, you know what I can do?
You could
let me
put it on the screen, probably.
That's what I'm gonna do. I forgot.
Shoot.
I forgot I can do this. Because I'm pulling up all these PDFs and whoop, let me just make sure they're all up right. And you can grab a screenshot if you feel like it as they're flying by. Let me just make sure I have them all up. And he's written some interesting papers as well. Okay, so present. I might go step by step through this.
It's fine.
Okay.
We're all here together.
Sharing the screen. So this is New Testament on sexuality. This comes from 2012. And then this is a paper published. When was this published? Recently, 2018-ish, Not as the Gentile Sexual Issues at the Interface Between Judaism and its Greco-Roman World. That's a great discussion of how they're kind of adopting and adapting what's going on in the Greco-Roman world. Enoch, Levi, and Jubilees on sexuality, attitudes towards sexuality in the early Enochic literature. Philo Josephus in the Testaments on sexuality. The Pseudepigrapha. And then same-sex relationships, a first-century perspective. This is a wonderful paper, and I'm trying to think if this is the one at the bottom. There's one of these. It might be this one. I appreciated this note at the end. Let me see if I... One can read Paul with respect, even though one may disagree with his assumptions, as today most people do, who affirm that being gay is not a sign of perversion, whether they then still retain the validity of the Leviticus prohibitions or see them too as not applicable, as do I. And he shares this wonderful quote from David Balk down at the bottom. Both Leviticus and Romans make ancient scientific assumptions about nature and gender that neither conservative nor progressive scholars could accept today. So I think.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No. I was just going to say I think Loader does a great job.
So this is jumping back a little bit, but I saw somebody ask a question about Job, the book of Job, and whoever said it, I'm sorry, I don't remember. If you want to retype it, please do. But I feel like they asked something about if we could discuss the themes and like how we make sense of that book. Much in the same way that I make sense of Ezekiel. No, which is I don't. Hey, Crystal. So I don't know if you want to touch on that. Because growing up, Job was always a real problem for me.
Yeah.
One, because the way I was taught the Bible was inerrancy and like God can never do any wrong, and he is, even if something seems like really cruel that he's doing, like it must just be beyond like my own understanding. And I'm like, and it just got to a point where I was like, I don't know, just kind of seems like an asshole in this story. So yeah, we can talk about it.
Well, and Job is trying to make sense of the problem of evil, which is a perennial issue for people who believe in a just God. And this is a time period when the Persian Empire and then the Hellenistic empires are kind of introducing a lot of new ways to think to Judaism, and we're getting a lot of literary exploration and a lot of philosophical exploration in this time period. And so people are starting to think more about personal issues, about individualism, about the self. And so we're getting these questions, why, are bad things happening to good people? And you see a shift from kind of an early skepticism like you see in Ecclesiastes, where it's basically just like everything sucks and then you die, deal with it. And in Job, it's kind of the same way. apart from the kind of narrative framing that gets added to it, where at the very end it's like, and then Job got everything back and he lived happily ever after. But it also blames this on Satan, or the Satan, not Satan as we think of Satan, but God's subordinate accuser person, by saying, well, that's really the origin of Job's suffering. God did not do it themselves. God just allowed it to happen. And so there actually seem to be a few different takes on what's going on. But yeah, Job is kind of has a similar perspective to Ecclesiastes, and just saying God's in charge. God can do what God wants. Who am I to complain? But kind of also leaning in the direction of what would come later, which is this idea that the afterlife is where the good are rewarded and the wicked are punished, which develops after the Persian period and the Greco-Roman period. And I would argue that it's precisely that discussion that gives rise to contemplating the nature of the afterlife and coming up with the idea, well, that maybe the good people who didn't have any good things happen to them in life are going to be rewarded in the afterlife, and maybe all these harsh, despotic rulers who have been oppressing us for so long, who never seem to have anything bad happen to them in this life, will be punished in the afterlife. And I've mentioned before, it seems to me that the distance between the average person and the potential for punishment in the afterlife was very great initially, because it was mainly just looking at people like Antiochus IV Epiphanes and these guys who were just really, really bad dudes, fantasizing about them getting their just desserts in the afterlife. But then over time, that space diminished and diminished and diminished until it got to the point where now everybody lives in fear of being punished in the afterlife. It becomes more useful as a rhetorical wedge for behavior and things like that.
Yeah. I also, so something that I think about a lot, as you know, is the way in which a lot of us, myself included, can leave religion and then still try to make sense of things in the same way that we did when we were a part of a religion, with just a different overlay, effectively. So something that I did, or I still do, going through the Old Testament, is just being yeah, I'm projecting my own kind of worldview or theological sort of understanding of things back. In the ancient world, the gods were the gods, period. There was two kinds of morality, one for you and none for them. And they could do what they wanted, and it wasn't your job to question what they were doing, but
Right.
It's just deal with it effectively. And if they end up being nice to you at the end, well, that's great, because they didn't have to do that. And so I think if we can, even if we're atheists or agnostics or whatever, if we can look at it and think of who could potentially be writing this and why they would be writing it and to who they were writing it. And this is all stuff Dan has already said, but just from a more sort of abstract point of view, when we can take it as a literary work and then sort of step into the shoes of the narrator and think gee, why would somebody write this? They're probably not having a great time. Probably not having I don't think whoever wrote Ezekiel, I don't think he was having a great time.
No.
My man was going through it. And so as was Job, but at least in Ezekiel, actually, I don't know that, so I'm not gonna say it. Yeah, I think hey Aaron, the longer I the more I start to try to separate 20 years of sort of indoctrination into a certain way of thinking from what I'm reading, one, the more interesting the text gets, but also it relieves this pressure from me to have to make sense of it or to make it something it's not. It's exactly what it looks like. It's exactly what it looks like. And then somebody in the same vein,
that brings up Jill Hicks Keaton's book, good book, how white evangelicals save the Bible to save themselves, which is about the domestication, the rehabilitation of the Bible, where there are problematic things in it. And a lot of people feel, sometimes intuitively, sometimes consciously, pressure to make the Bible good, because it is anathema for a lot of people to just say, hey, the author was wrong here. They were an idiot. They were a bigot. They were whatever. And we don't have to listen to them. That is a bridge too far for so many people.
Yeah. Somebody asked if we can discuss atheism in the ancient world. Guys, I'm not Dan's secretary. Like, I'm trying to see these comments, but like, I'm not going to be able to get to all of them. I did see that this person said that when they were a Christian, they thought that homosexuality was like demons. They're atheists now, and they credit you with a lot of like changing their minds on that. From here on out, don't tag me to get to Dan. Thank you. I cannot. It happens to me all the time. Go ahead.
So Tim Whitmarsh wrote a wonderful book called Battling the Gods, Atheism in the Ancient World. This was published by Vintage Books. I think this is probably the best recent discussion out there regarding atheism in the ancient world. So if you would like a book on that, I would go see what Tim has to say.
And what period does that cover? Like, how far back does it go?
This is mainly going to be in the classical period.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to say, if you go farther than that, like it gets very hard to separate religion and daily life in the way that we think of it, because they didn't think about religion in the way that we think of it. And so something else that's been really interesting is to realize how Western the term religion is, and how it's effectively been used to describe the behaviors of others, using sort of their beliefs as the, like, this is
a template.
Yeah, this is obviously, this is the standard, right? And so, like, if you don't fit into this, you're practicing some weird religion. Right. I'm practicing the truth. And like, they didn't have this sense of religion. They just had a sense of trying to keep the gods happy or God happy, because they were trying to have some control of their world. But it was so much a part of their life that it wasn't religion in the way that we think of it.
Yeah, the consensus thinking now is that the concept of religion is something that developed between medieval Islam, the Renaissance, the Reformation, and the Enlightenment. And today, the concept is really, Brenton Ongbury, I think, puts it best in his book Before Religion from a decade ago, that most people's concept of religion means anything that sufficiently resembles Protestant Christianity. And when you look in the 19th century, you see like the United States of America going to Japan and going, what's your religion? And then going, what does that mean? And they're going, well, it means you have scriptures, you have this, and you have this. And they're like, we don't have anything like that. And they're like, get one. And then we can do business. And so they said, all right, Shinto. And so they created a concept of religion just to be able to do business with America. And yeah, you have the invention of religion in all kinds of different indigenous societies. In fact, that's a wonderful book by, I forget his first name, but his last name is Cox, C-O-X. The Invention of Religion in Indigenous Societies is all about how we went into like the South Pacific and elsewhere and said, oh, that thing over there, that's your religion. And they didn't know what we were talking about, but we did. We said, bam, religion. And we took off.
Bam, religion.
And so now they think about their traditions as being religions, even though that is not how they organize their knowledge prior to us coming in and telling them how to think about it. You need a book club. Share the books. Yeah, I got plenty of books to talk about. But aren't atheists in the ancient world not the same definition of atheist in our current modern era? Because I'm pretty sure that atheists in the ancient world still believed in the God. Kinda. Atheist anciently meant that you maybe not denied the existence of, but rebelled against and criticized a given deity. It didn't necessarily mean all deities. So yeah, a person could be an atheist and still believe in God. In fact, today, according to Pew, about 3% of atheists report that they are certain that a God exists. So, and you have a good percentage of Christians who are certain that God doesn't exist, and even more Jewish folks who are certain of that, and even more Buddhist folks who are certain of that. So our concept of religion is trying to compartmentalize things that are not compartmentalizable.
Sorry, someone was reading a paper about ancient Greek and Sumerian voodoo dolls, and it described rituals meant to bind Aries and stuff. So was faith back then more transactional? I mean, yeah, it was like 100% transactional. Like this idea of like having faith to make you feel good was like not really a thing for a long time. It was very much like make these offerings to the gods so that they will hopefully do what we want them to do, whether that has something to do with the weather or going into battle or curing somebody that was sick. Like it was very much like trying to do all of the things in an effort to get them to do something for you. Like I know that in ancient, I can't remember if they're Sumerian or Akkadian, but there's a type of prayer that's effectively like waving your hands trying to get God's attention, like because they're not paying attention to you. I think that's like one of the biggest themes in the ancient world is that like gods, whoever, are removed from the people that they've created, and in many cases don't pay any attention to them for a long time until sort of like all of the like like the flood story, like in the P source, there's like 10 generations or something where the earth's getting wickeder and wickeder, and it's not until there's this sort of accumulation of like violence and blood and whatever that something gets Yahweh's attention and he decides to do something, right? So it's like this like touchy-feely God that a lot of people think of in like modern times. It's just not the way God was gods or deities were conceptualized in the ancient world at all.
Right. Agreed. Here's an interesting question. How did monotheism come about? And did it happen around the same time in Egyptian or Amarna period and Persia? No, monotheism as we understand it today, I would argue, is something that does not develop until the more philosophical strata of late antique Christianity, medieval Judaism, and then the Enlightenment. The term wasn't even coined until around 1660 by a Cambridge Platonist named Henry Moore. And ever since then, the meaning that it has had generally referred to a modern concept of the Christian deity that requires creation ex nihilo. Like Moore and others were very adamant that just believing in one God wasn't enough. It had to be the right type of God. And so it had to be a God that's created all that exists out of nothing and is the very foundation of all creation and all this kind of stuff. And so that's not in the Bible at all. That is not what Akhenaten was doing. It is not what Zoroastrianism was doing in Persia. And so people toss around the word monotheism an awful lot and probably shouldn't. In fact, I've organized a conference with the help of some friends that will take place at Brown University. Yeah.
With Josiah.
And with a handful of other folks, some wonderful folks, including Paula Friedrichsen, Stephen Young. We're going to have Jen Singletary, Emma Wasserman. We're going to have a bunch of folks, and the conference is called The Meanings and Ends of Monotheism. The idea being, this is what monotheism is used to mean. This is why we think we need to put an end to using monotheism to talk about the biblical world. So we're going to argue pretty vociferously that we should stop using monotheism to talk about the Bible. And we should stop using religion, the word religion, to talk about the Bible as well.
Yes.
Let's see. Oh, what was I going to bring up? Speaking of religion, so I do online classes every now and then I joined up with Robin Faith Walsh and Candida Moss, and we're taking turns teaching online classes. And if you're not aware, on Tuesday, the 28th of November, Robin Walsh will be teaching her class called Ancient Sci-Fi and Early Christianity. So she's going to be talking about astrology in the ancient world and how they talked about astral deities and all that kind of stuff and how that influenced early Christianity.
I want to go.
It's going to be a good time. And if you're interested in that, you can go to didascaloid.com and find more information. But the class I'm going to be teaching in December is going to be called What is Religion? And I'm going to start with the terms that we use today, go back, trace them down to their roots, talk about how the concept of religion developed, talk about how scholars today talk about religion and how the framework functions. So if you're interested in a much deeper dive into where the concept of religion comes from, I think that'll be a great time.
Or you can come take my Intro to Religious Studies class where we beat what religion means into the ground before deciding that, in fact, we cannot define it particularly well. And I don't want to talk about it anymore.
I have a paper on that called Religion and Description, where I go into why it's not something that can be defined, and we should stop trying to define it.
Thank you.
Apart from like a discursive definition, which is what a scholar named Koku von Stuckrad has argued for. Yeah. Here's a question. What's the deal with Leviticus 18 and 22? I believe where it speaks on same-sex intercourse between men. Should we just forget about it, just like forgetting mixed clothing or shellfish? So one, if you are not Jewish and you do not live within the land of Israel, then it already has no relevance to you whatsoever. These are instructions to the people of the land of Israel and the house of Israel. So according to its own terms, doesn't have relevance to anybody. But if we look at what rationalizations are undergirding this, the idea is that you don't want to pollute the land, because if you pollute the land will expel you. You will be vomited out of the land. And so when these acts take place, you have to do things to expunge the pollution from the land, which usually means killing the people involved or something similar. And so what's undergirding this is the idea that there's a metaphysical contamination that is generated by these actions, and you need to somehow purge the land of those metaphysical contaminants. That's the rationalization for why it is wrong for a man to take the insertive role. Notice Leviticus 18 and 20 only condemn the man who takes the insertive role. Now, it takes two to tango, but they would have considered the person in the receptive role to be a victim, to be an unwilling participant. And they say absolutely nothing whatsoever about female same-sex intercourse, because this is rooted in the semen, and you don't want to waste it, and this is the powerful whatever. So the rationalizations here are completely outdated and totally irrelevant to any kind of sexual ethic today. And so, yes, we should forget about it.
I think, never mind. You know what? I'm going to hold that joke inside. Yeah, it's like, I know this is not unique. Sorry, go ahead.
No, real quick. Somebody asked when the conference is. It's May, I think 6th and 7th, but I'll be promoting this more in 2024. I apologize. Go on.
No, it's fine. I was just going to say, like, I know this is not unique to the Hebrew Bible, but I do, like, it is funny to me in some ways, like, how concerned they were, and men still continue to be, about, like, their genitalia and, like, how much power it has. Like, and I know it's like, haha, funny, but, like, it's, I mean, when we think about, circumcision or, like, things like this, right? Like, there really is a lot of attention paid to it, and it's just, like, I don't know. Silly. Just having a silly time.
Yeah, well, and it's something that if you like Freud, there's a lot going on there. But yeah, they definitely took it very seriously.
Oh God. Sorry.
Too much focus on the D. Who was my podcast co-host was like when we had a guest on talking about source criticism of the Pentateuch, was just like so much talk of D's and P's and everything. I
Oh
was
my
just
God.
it was all I could do to keep from making jokes.
Yeah, if you have
Okay.
a 12-year-old sense of humor like myself, it is.
Yeah.
difficult.
Does Numbers 5's discussion of the ordeal of the bitter water not condone abortion? It condones abortion to the degree that God indiscriminately killing humans is condoning murder. Like it does not. I would argue, and here I would say there's not as clear a consensus. I would say there are probably almost as many scholars, if not just as many scholars, who would disagree with me than agree with me. I don't think Numbers 5 has a pregnancy in view. And I think the imagery that is being used and the punishments and the blessings of the ordeal indicate that the woman is not pregnant. Because the blessing, if she's innocent, is that she will conceive. She's not running around with a pregnancy right now. But if she were pregnant and this ordeal actually constituted an abortive fashion, which it does not, and it actually did anything to her, then yeah, that would be killing the fetus. And so it would at least be saying God has no problem with killing a fetus if it is the result of adultery. But God has no problem with killing anybody anywhere in the Bible.
No.
So that is not saying you're good, go do those things. I don't think that that passage is a good argument for people to use in debates about the morality of abortion. And I'm writing that chapter right now for my book on does the Bible say abortion is murder? And the answer is no.
Yeah, because they had no idea what abortion was.
Well, yeah, I think the women who did it would they had their plants and stuff that they would mix up to try to use, but it wasn't something that was widely discussed. It was just, your mother, your friend, your whatever said, if you do this, then you'll get rid of that.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's a lot of the things that people used in the ancient world. Christians today would say like witchcraft.
Yeah.
Like I guess. As a gay man, I assure you the Bible's attention paid to my genitals is unwelcome. Yeah, well.
But I think there's an interesting connection between the ordeal of bitter waters and the story of the woman taken in adultery. Because they bring her to the temple. She's caught in the act. They bring her to the temple, just like the man is supposed to bring the woman suspected of adultery to the temple. And they ask Jesus what should be done. And Jesus bends over and writes in the dirt on the temple floor. There's only one other place where we hear about the dirt of the temple floor, and that's in the ordeal of the bitter waters, where you're supposed to write a curse, scrape the curse into the water, take some of the dust from the temple floor, and put that in the water with the written curse, mix it up, and she's supposed to drink that. And so I've wondered if the story is not kind of putting Jesus in the position of the one who oversees the judgment, the one who decides if the woman is guilty or not. And in this, so he's writing in, so we've got the overlapping of writing and the dirt of the temple floor and the woman in adultery, and are you going to condemn her? And Jesus says no. But the problems with the story are also discussed in Jill Hicks Keaton's wonderful book. Good book.
Yeah, Jesus doing a little spell work.
Yeah.
We support Jesus.
Some light sympathetic magic.
Yeah. I actually like that one picture of him where it looks like he has a little wand. I'm like, yes, Jesus.
Yeah. 1 Corinthians 3:17 through 19. Let me take a look real quick. NRSV, if anyone destroys God's temple, God will destroy that person, for God's temple is holy, and you are that temple. Do not deceive yourselves, for the wisdom of the world is blah, 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 blah. Yeah, so this is kind of the trump card, that no matter what anyone says, no matter what anyone can demonstrate, no matter what argument anyone has, all you have to do is just say, the God says so, which is not engaging anything. But I folks who are going to appeal to that passage as a trump card against any rationality are not open to being reasoned with for the most part. And so I don't know how you engage someone like that. I think it takes some personal experiences or personal relationships that will allow them to let down their guard. But someone who immediately appeals to passages like that sounds like their guard is constantly up. So that's a long road.
A long road.
But I know folks who have been staunchly, very conservative, have been condemnatory of LGBTQ plus folks, who then discover that they have a niece or a nephew or a child or a sibling, and it may take years, but they come around because of that personal relationship, because they see the harm that it does, because they realize the corrosiveness of holding on to that hatred and that condemnation of someone who is close to them. So sometimes it feels like a waste of time, but we got to keep trying.
Yeah, I guess. We do. For what it's worth, I was very conservative growing up, and even into my early 20s, and I also thought that all of these same things, and thought homosexuality was this horrible sin, and I lost friends because of it, and eventually I figured it out. Eventually, but it does happen. It just happens over such an extended amount of time that oftentimes each interaction just feels like the same banging of the head against the wall.
Yes. Excuse me. Here's an interesting question. Any idea why there have been so many changes to the New Testament as opposed to the Tanakh and the Quran? Why are Christians bad at copying holy texts? So the first thing I would say is that the Tanakh has probably 10 times as many changes to it as the New Testament. And then the Quran is also not in pristine condition. But we have the Tanakh comes from well before the New Testament. Then we have the New Testament. And then centuries after that, we have the Quran. And across this time period is kind of a developing sense of the text as the locus of authority. As in the Tanakh and into the early periods of Christianity, it was not the text that was the authority. It was the tradition. It was the words, the living words. The text was considered dead letters. They are something different from the actual words that are spoken. And so this is why they talk about in early Christianity, you have these discussions about the Jewish scriptures just being scriptures, but we have the words of Jesus. And that means not the written words, the spoken, orally transmitted words. But within the next couple of centuries, because of philosophy, because of changing technologies, the locus of authority moves from orally transmitted words to the actual text itself, the materialization of those words in text. And so the New Testament is coming about in that time period. And so very quickly in the transmission of the New Testament manuscripts, you have a lot of changes going on early on, and then they kind of decide, we need to keep very careful track of these. And after that, most of the changes are incidental or are minor. The Quran, coming centuries down the road, is already deeply embedded in this notion that the text has authority. However, you still have a lot of variant manuscripts. Only something you had in early Islam was an organized, systematic attempt to destroy those traditions that deviated from what became the standardized Quranic tradition. And so I think it was around I want to say 850s CE, there was a widespread systematic destruction of deviant manuscript traditions. And so we just don't have a lot of the data to be able to show how much has changed. We are left with what became the standardized tradition. And then in the Tanakh, the Dead Sea Scrolls show that there were all kinds of variations. The book of Jeremiah and the Septuagint, and attested in the Dead Sea Scrolls, is 1/6 shorter than the book of Jeremiah as it is in the Masoretic text. We have all kinds of different variations, and sometimes different order, like the books of Samuel and Kings are the orders are mixed up in the Dead Sea Scrolls. So it's complex.
We were working through Jeremiah 25 the other day, and honestly, it's so much weirder than I remembered. But anyway, it just reminded me when you brought up Jeremiah.
Yeah, once you dig into those things, sometimes they get real weird real quick.
I mean, for that in particular, I think it's just because growing up in such a charismatic tradition, when I read it, it was just sort of understood that it was sort of this like ecstatic like vision or something, like some kind of trance state where he's like seeing himself do all of these things. And when we worked through it in class, like our professor was saying like, no, this is written in a very literal sense. Like it's saying he did this, he did that. Not like he had this vision that he was doing it in heaven. Like he was really going around to all the nations with this like cup of poison, being like, hey, drink, it's poison. And then when they don't want to drink, be like, well, you have to do it anyway. Because like, and it's just, yeah, it's so much weirder than I remember.
Yeah, we need bumper stickers to say, keep the Bible weird.
Yeah, I like
but
it.
Yeah, a lot of people are uncomfortable with the weirdness, which is why, and I don't know where the book went.
Yeah, well,
it's around here somewhere. God's Monsters by Esther Hamori.
Oh yeah,
is a wonderful discussion of just how weird the Bible can get. Maybe
the Bible's quite weird. Yeah, I want to. Once I like have more than like $5, I want to order that book and a bunch of other things. But grad school.
Yeah, that's how it goes.
Yeah, it's good times. Super good times.
Wanted to say I'm a longtime Religion for Breakfast viewer. Saw his post to check out your content and have been enjoying immensely. Well, thank you for that. I appreciate that. Andrew is a good dude and a friend of mine. And I was hanging out with him last week at SBL. And we have some things cooking, some collaborations that we are working towards. So yeah, if you're a fan of Religion for Breakfast, then hopefully I do Andrew justice. And if you're not, you should be. Andrew does phenomenal work. The production value on his YouTube videos far exceeds anything that I have ever produced. So check him out. Dan's been hit with the curse of allergies for months now. It seems like no one just keep getting sick. And this time was because I screwed up my throat, having to yell late into the night at very loud receptions at a conference. And if my throat gets damaged, then inevitably I get sick immediately after that.
Of course. Of course.
I hear so little about the other Abrahamic faiths, such as the Mandaeans. Check out James McGrath's work on the Mandaeans. He's done a lot of great stuff. He has a translation of the Mandaean Book of John that he did with another scholar and has interviewed them and has published a lot on them. So if you're interested, he does good stuff.
Read it.
And they are the only Gnostic group that is still around today.
Let's see. Dan, how much time do you have so we can...
I probably need to go in about 11 minutes.
All right. Any last minute questions here? No. I don't think we have any evidence that Paul was gay.
Yeah, some people think he was ace, but yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that we have evidence. Maybe you have more, but like I for me, what I think and believe, if he was one of the two, it would probably be asexual, since he's so like sort of uninterested in sex and in marriage and in all of those things. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I mean, considering his sort of theological worldview at the time. But the way he handles it, it like doesn't seem like it's a huge thing that he's like really wants to do.
Yeah. Somebody asked what the thorn in his side was, and I think there's an argument to make that he thought he was possessed by a demon. And in a recent episode of the Data Over Dogma podcast, where we interviewed Isaac Soon, who just published a book called A Disabled Apostle, we talk about how disability might have been part of the thorn in the side. So check out that interview with Isaac Soon. You can find the Data Over Dogma podcast anywhere you get podcasts. It's also on YouTube. And then there's also an episode of the Data Over Dogma podcast entirely dedicated to homosexuality in the Bible. So if you would like a much deeper dive than I was able to offer here, I would check that out as well. And I even offered some different references in that episode.
Is blasphemy of the Spirit really an unforgivable sin? I hear this mixed among family Christians of different sects.
I mean, it says that in the New Testament, but whether or not there's some metaphysical truth to that is something outside of biblical scholarship. Is Dan religious? I am religious, but I keep my religion completely separate from my scholarship. And if you think that you have discovered it leaking into my scholarship, you have not. So yeah, I that kind of stuff every single day.
Also, so was Satan smarmy in Hebrew in the beginning of Job? I swear he sounds sassy in English traditions. So I think it's one part of this is worth noting, and I saw something about this in a question before, but we kind of missed it, I think. Effectively, like, as Dan was saying, Ha-Satan is not Satan as we think of him. It's like the adversary or like an accuser, but he would have been like on the divine council. He wasn't like coming up from hell or something where he's like, let me go up and see God real quick and like wreak some havoc.
Not like South Park where he's like, hey God.
He's living up there and like he's not hated. That's like his role on this council. Yeah. And so like we could say that, but like I don't know about the Hebrew, but I would imagine he sounds a little.
Yeah, and there's a chapter on the adversary in Esther Hamori's book, God's Monsters. So there's great discussion of Job as well. Or you can go to The Satan, how God's executioner became the enemy. And I'm blanking on the author right now, but that's a decent book. And then Archie Wright has another one on the origins of Satan and the problem of evil in the Bible.
Keeps it private.
Did Paul? Somebody said, did Paul believe that Jesus was a pre-existent angelic being? Richard Carey and Bart Ehrman finally seem to agree on this one thing. I think that Jesus, in the developing tradition of Jesus, you have the convergence of Son of Man traditions, of Angel of Adonai traditions, of exalted human traditions. All different traditions are converging in this traditional grab bag that becomes Jesus Christ. And so, yes, I would argue, as you see this, there's a red volume back here. It's the Philippians commentary from the Hermeneia series, my favorite commentary series. Paul Holloway, I think, wrote the one on Philippians and points out that Philippians, the hymn in Philippians, seems to align with this idea that Paul thought of Jesus as someone who was endowed with the divine name, either as an exalted human, as a leading angel, or as this angel of Adonai. And in my book, the appendix of my book, I talk about how my model for communicable divine agency can account for what's going on in early Christology and how the angel of Adonai plays into that. So I think it's likely that Paul thought that there was something going on with the angel of the Lord.
All right. Any last minute questions? Otherwise.
Oh, and any idea what blasphemy of the Spirit meant historically? It just would have been any misuse of the Spirit or condemnation of the Spirit. Blasphemy was just, someone speaking evil of the entity. So that's what that would be.
These are my favorite lives because everybody asks questions I didn't think of. And then I get to learn, and then I get to take it to school and pretend like it's mine thought that I had. Because it actually makes me a lot douchier when I start like saying, I was like talking to John McClellan.
Not as douchey as I sounded when I ran into a friend in the lobby of the hotel and had to do some name dropping myself with some of the celebrity friends that I've made recently. And immediately upon, I was like, just do it. And then immediately upon doing the name dropping, I was like, that's the douchiest thing in the world. This person thinks I'm such an idiot. And I was like, oh, I apologize. That was really
no. Hey, you know what? Do it. You didn't miss anything. I didn't give my background, not for any particular reason, except for that Dan already knows, and as did a lot of the people that were in the chat. Briefly, I grew up evangelical. I was evangelical for like 20-something years. I left the church after reading lots and lots of biblical scholarship. That was about 10 years ago, and lots of things have happened since then. I would still consider myself agnostic atheist. And I am in divinity school at the University of Chicago studying ancient religions and cultures and languages. That's the real short version.
And hopefully having a blast amidst all of
sometimes
the chaos. Yeah.
No. I'm having honestly, I like it. Yeah, I love it. It's where I want to be. It's hard sometimes. It's like exhausting sometimes, but I'm having a good time. I like it. Chicago. I'll show it off anytime I can. When anyone asks for my email, I give them my school email. If you guys didn't know, this is from going to school. No. But it's good. I'm having a good time. I mean, I spend a lot of time in libraries and cafes, but I like it. So anyway, that's all.
All right.
Well, thanks for joining us. Is my open closet a thematic choice? No, I actually meant to I meant to close it, but my cat's litter box is in there, and so I didn't want to have to. Yeah, you never know.
Yeah.
Anyway, love y'all. Thanks for having me. Thanks for doing this. This was fun. Let's do it again sometime.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Check out, I think December 15th, we're doing our D&D campaign, and Heathen Queen and I are newbies. It's going to be our first time doing this, so expect us to be awful at it, or at least me to be. I mean,
I would assume I'm going to be awful as well.
And we are having a special guest that we will be interviewing for a forthcoming episode of the Data Over Dogma podcast on Tuesday, where we're going to do a mailbag episode because this person is not an expert in biblical studies. And so send us questions you would like us to address in the episode. Email them to contact@dataoverdogmapod.com.
I have a question for this person. Can we be friends? No.
You'll have to check out the episode, but I've got a lot of friends who want to be friends with this person. So
I'm sure. Yeah.
All right.
I don't know. Yeah. All right. I'm gonna let you go. Thank you again. It's been lovely.
I didn't know she was Druish. All right. Thank you so much for your time. Hope you have a wonderful week.
Oh, you too.
Thank you. And we'll be back around at some point soon. Yeah, I'll get over this. I always do.
All right.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.